want you to welcome Ryan DuPont from GZA Engineering, the engineering company in Rhode Island that is working up design plans for the rebuilding of the Hicksbridge Landing, and the town's new town planner, Michael Burris. And we also have Jim Hartnett, town manager. We've had some time to look at the plan, and I've distributed a photograph, which I don't have copies of a very busy day at the landing. And I've just met very shortly with Ryan over at the landing, and he said he's excited to have those plans. This is that very busy day. And so, yeah, maybe you could explain our options, because you said it had been optimized, the first plan for flow rather than parking.
Right, so were we able to confirm the use of the existing gravel exit ramp?
We're going ahead with that.
Okay,
Yes,
so we'll just
that's-
get that right off the table. So
Yes.
that option doesn't matter. Yeah, so that was one of the first things we talked about today, when looking at the picture of the busy day at the ramp compared to what we're showing here for parking striping. It's pretty apparent that we need to focus on creating additional trailer parking, more beyond what we're showing on this concept, which is fine. It's good to get that feedback. What we had looked at, sort of the guidance on what's here, is we were considering traffic flow, the turning moves to get the trailers in and out of the site so that things aren't backing up. That's why the spaces are angled for the trailers, so that you would come in on the paved site, drive down the middle aisle, back down the ramp, then you would pull forward into a parking spot, and then you come out of the angle spot and you're lined up to exit, which is also why we're not currently showing trailer parking on the side of the ramp, though clearly as the site's currently utilized, people are parallel parking trailers on the ramp. So that's something we'll have to evaluate the feasibility of, which we didn't even really consider what we were looking at here. And then other features of the site design, we're showing stormwater management areas. Those haven't been sized or designed yet, but they're just blue clouds showing ideally where we would like to move the water. There's an existing stormwater discharge underneath the paved ramp off of Hicksbridge Road that goes into the river. It's currently untreated, so we'd like to add a BMP in that area so that we're actually sending treated water into the river rather than untreated runoff. Improve the environmental performance of the site, as well as accessibility and recreational use.
If one of the issues will be how big are the trailer spaces as far as how much we can have people on both trailers on
Right.
both sides. My experience of driving by there is it's typically mostly 14 to 18 foot boats, and then occasionally a 20-foot boat. Is it against the rules if someone ever shows up with a 24-foot boat to park in or does it just make it a little harder for someone else to get around?
I mean, it makes it harder. I assume the town probably doesn't have boat trailer parking lot standards. Is that correct? you just have regular standards, but you don't have trailers. So that may be something to consider then, is right now we're showing all of the trailer parking as the same size. We could actually vary the sizes of the trailer parking
To create more spaces.
to create more spaces, especially if we think, we only need maybe 2 spaces for, 22 or 24-foot boats, and we're going to primarily focus spaces on 18-foot boats. I think we drew the spaces 50 feet in length, but if you're primarily looking at 18-foot boats, you don't actually necessarily need 50 feet.
I see, Richie, you've got your hand up.
Well, the state ramp, we redid it, 2001. And, it has line parking like you see at most ramps. And we got into a situation where one guy with a double axle trailer would screw the whole works up. So we put up signs, and I think they're still there, right, Chris? Single axle trailers. So
So you've restricted it to single axle trailers.
which basically restricts the length of the boat in most cases.
And I would think, given that that's in general closer to deeper water, that's the place where people want to be putting in bigger boats anyhow, right? But again, I'm not a motorboater, so I don't know. Has there been pressure, Chris, our harbor master, about parking for bigger trailers?
At the Hicksbridge ramp or in general?
Or in general, yeah.
No.
So that seems like we could maximize things.
Yeah, so in that case, we'll want to revise and we'll look at reducing the size of the trailer parking spaces, which should help us create more spaces.
And then you had said to me, there's also an issue of how much angle, I mean, because as you diagonal the parking spaces, you lose parking spaces.
You do, right. So if we wanted to look at going straight, you would be able to have more spaces. The turning radius would become a little bit more difficult, though that may actually be mitigated by the fact if we're shrinking the spaces. If you go to a 40-foot length, you have an extra 10 feet to make the turning move now. So that's something we're definitely going to want to look at with shorter spaces, is the potential to go perpendicular, which does add, it'll probably add 1 or 2 spaces to that alignment.
If you were perpendicular.
Right, versus the angle, because you lose
Okay.
area when the spot's angled. It makes it easier to turn out of, but you do lose area.
And I had also noted that typically when there are cars, there are typically multiple people that are going to the same event.
Mhm.
And so that historically they've been parking each other in. Like when there's 40 people that show up to row, when there's 20 people that show up to an early morning row, they typically take 10 spaces. They park each other in.
Yeah, is that something we can do per the town standards? Would we need a waiver or variance for that?
We don't have any regulations against parking in.
Okay, all right,
So
that's good to know. So we could potentially look at stacking the passenger vehicle spaces then.
Yeah, or they
Okay.
would just park in trailer spaces,
Right.
which is sort of what they do now.
Okay.
And they even do that when the lot isn't crowded, just because they're trying to have a relatively low impact. So
Right.
suddenly a lot of people show up, so they're used to doing that. And I don't think we'll see a huge growth in car top kayaking, canoeing.
Mhm.
We're sort of trying to encourage people to use the head of Westport for that.
Okay. Yes, they're expecting predominantly trailer use.
Yep. Is that sort of your experience?
I see an awful lot of fishermen there just parking single cars, trucks. And,
I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself again so people
Richard
will
Murphy,
know?
I'm the closest abutter. I live across the street from the
Right.
282 Hicksbridge.
And we don't currently have a regulation about you have to have a trailer to park there, right? It's just, as long as you have a permit, legally you can park there.
In the state boat ramp,
You
you
gotta
need
have,
to have a truck and trailer.
right,
There are locations for car topping canoes and kayaks.
at the state ramp.
Yes. People do get ticketed for looking like they're parking, but really having a car topper. So parking tickets need to be amended. But paddlecraft is wildly popular
Mhm.
everywhere.
Right. So who tickets at the state boat ramp?
That would be the Westport PD.
The state environmental people, or your office doesn't do that?
We have the ability to
Mm-hmm.
through our office, yes. If you want to compare it to the state boat ramp, you have town police, state police, EPO police, Westport police, Westport harbor masters.
Right, but you don't get, so I don't see that particularly changing at Hicksbridge with any of this.
I think it would just be the two entities,
Yep,
and I don't think that the town of Westport is going to give up Hicksbridge to then become another state boat ramp.
no, that's been our focus.
Yes.
And I may have said at earlier meetings that I had hoped that there would be some sort of treatment and catchment ponds on all three sides of the parking lot, and it turns out that I'm an amateur and do not understand, and that it is wise to have them. Why don't you just explain that?
Yeah, so we looked at, the grading of the parking lot. Not surprisingly, it's a boat ramp, slopes down to the boat ramp. Though there is the exit ramp, also has a lot of runoff. So we added a conceptual stormwater management area to deal, I guess, to be on the eastern piece of the
If
site.
you want to point to the screen.
That's better? Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Just leave this right here, hopefully you can hear me. So this stormwater management area here, the design concept of this is to handle stormwater runoff off of the entrance ramp. This would have to be slightly regraded to kind of pitch water into some type of gutter here. It would go in. The stormwater management to the north of the site, this already exists. It's not currently designed to any stormwater standards. It's really just kind of a trench with vegetation in poor condition that takes water off of Hicks Bridge. These catch basins discharge, fills up, flows through this trench, and then there's a culvert underneath the paved entrance that discharges into the Westport River. So we'd like to take this area, make it a little bit larger, actually make it designed to meet stormwater management standards so that it has filtration, treatment, infiltration capacity, and then design it in a manner that we're moving,
Sorry, time
that we're
out.
moving treated stormwater into the river rather than untreated stormwater. And then we also considered putting a stormwater management area on the south side. It would be kind of below some of this ADA space. You can see these contours are moving water this way, so we'd like to catch it here. This could potentially, depending on what we do for ramp rigging, maybe extend over here as a little bit of a swale to catch water here, and then we'd have to look at potentially outletting into the river from here as well. The existing pipe underneath the paved entrance ramp stops like halfway up the riprap slope. And if you go look on the site, you can see there's erosion because of that. So we'd like to actually extend the pipe so that we can get the water into the river so that it's not, what happens here is it discharges out and then it flows overland and it's bringing sand and other sediment into the river.
Would the pipe be visible?
It depends on grading. We'd like to bury it as much as possible. It would probably be visible at the end, so like this is elevation 0 here. We're gonna start at elevation
So in the
at
beach?
5. So we'd be able to bury it to elevation maybe 1 or 2.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so probably into the tidal zone,
Right.
it would be buried.
Because one of the things I've realized is that's sort of a nice beach too.
Right.
I mean, sort of, it's not quite as nice at low tide, but that's true of a lot of river beaches.
So that was our initial look at stormwater and the potential for where we could include stormwater treatment. And we will need to provide stormwater treatment. The whole site is roughly 2 acres. Most of it is gonna be paved when we're done, so we'll need to treat about that 2 acres worth of water.
And with those kind of improvements, for people at home who may be worrying about the cost of all this, these kind of improvements all make us eligible for all kinds of grant funding.
Yes, so having stormwater treatment and improving, right now we have a gravel lot with really no stormwater management devices. That does, when you go look at the site, you can see there's sediment being deposited into a marsh area over here and sediment into a marsh area over here. So the addition of these stormwater management areas would check boxes for certain grant application types that we are having stormwater improvements, coastal and wetland improvements, so that these elements of the project do make it more competitive as a grant application candidate.
People have questions?
I got a couple of questions.
Good.
So the parking area is going to be paved,
That's the assumption we're working on right now.
so the stormwater is more for treatment, not for storage, right?
Correct.
So you just go, okay.
Yeah, so the existing lot being gravel, you basically consider that 100% of the water that lands on that is running off, and pavement won't change that. So we'll have roughly an equivalent volume of water running off. Right now, there's no water quality treatment. which is something we'd like to incorporate into the project, and we'll actually have to for COMCOM permits and state permits.
And you're going into tidal water, so the detention or retention doesn't make a whole lot of.
Right, exactly. We're going into tidal water, so that standard's actually waived.
And then parking spaces at the state ramp are 40 feet. I don't know, you had 50 feet.
We have 50, so that's good to know. They're 40. That's
They're 40, yeah.
I think one of the
And there's
things.
some that overhang, I mean, you go there some days in the trail as well. But they manage down there. And
Yeah,
their
that's-
parking spaces, they're on a slight angle, but they're pretty perpendicular to the end, and they manage to get in and out. It almost looks tighter than what you have here, but it might be worth just taking a look at that. And
Yeah, we can go look at that. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for, and that's I think one of the big takeaways for today is we're going to go smaller on the trailer parking spaces and try to fit more of them in.
And then the exit, the existing exit, if we keep that, we looked at going both sides of the pole or just staying on one side.
We haven't spoken about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't given any thought to that.
I mean, my sense is, if you're going east, it would be tricky to turn east around that pole with a trailer if somebody else was accelerating up the hill, although you do have line of sight, so.
Yeah, it's worth looking at. We want to try to avoid moving the pole because takes a lot of work.
Right. Yes, sir.
I would suggest that you build some sort of an island so it diverts the traffic on either side of the pole, if you can keep the pole. Because that really does make a difference as far as people pulling out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And, the other question I have is there's a lot of oil and gasoline that gets spilled over the process of people loading and unloading boats at the trailer. Don't you think that having that paved would actually increase the amount of oil or toxic waste going into the river? No?
My sense is we're redirecting the water away from the river, so it's going through water treatment on its way. Is that kind of the?
Yeah, so one of the goals, or sort of secondary goals that will happen in a stormwater system is, if we do now, if somebody spills out in the trailer parking space, the stormwater management area would treat that water. A spill on the boat ramp is going to end up in the water untreated, just because it's the way the nature of a boat ramp is it has to be sloped towards the water, so we can't catch rainfall. In terms of gas releases, oil releases, I don't specifically know the answer to that question, but if it spills on pavement, it can potentially be easier to clean up because it stays on the surface. Or if you spill on gravel, you have contaminated soils and whatnot.
You get evaporation.
Yeah, right. You can get some evaporation, but I don't actually know the answer to the.
You also get containment
Yeah.
areas, right? So if you have a bigger spill, it's going to drain, at least if you're not on the boat ramp, it's going to drain to those detention or to those
Correct.
treatment areas, and you could temporarily block it off until it was cleaned
Right.
up. But right now, like you said, it would go into the gravel and into the groundwater. There's pluses and minuses to both, I think.
And my sense is that the east end of the parking lot is 18 to 22 inches higher than the upper lip of the boat ramp. Because this was a gravel pit, we're expecting this to be relatively easy to excavate, so that we would move an enormous amount of material from the east end to the west end, which would berm up the top of the boat ramp against sea level increase, and would then push more of any polluted runoff into these treatment areas, so that the expectation is that everything would get better.
The other question I have is regarding the exit ramp. The parking on the southern end of the ramp, the single vehicle parking, doesn't really give you a lot of room to loop around there and get up there. Am I just reading this wrong? The other parallelogram that's up there, which is I can't read it without my glasses. Something that accommodates parking.
There's some vehicle parking.
Pre-graded.
Yeah, so one of the things we were looking at doing here, and we didn't show proposed gradings as a concept, is we think part of this riprap slope here can be removed and flattened out, and then the turning move, you'd have this space over here to get onto the ramp, would be the concept to kind of mitigate what you're pointing out, that this is blocking part of the ramp, but we'd be trying to open up an access to the ramp over here. But yeah, no, that's exactly what that cloud's for, is what you're pointing out.
And that's partially because the beginning slope of the ramp is not that
Right, it's not that steep, so we think there's potential to flatten that out to get a wider entrance onto the ramp.
One final question.
Sure, no, but this is what we want to hear, so.
The actual ramp, are you gonna put in a cofferdam to pour the concrete, or are you going to just have pre-constructed concrete slabs that you're putting in there?
So yeah, the actual boat ramp, we have not gotten that far in the design yet. So I don't actually have an answer for that. And some of that, you know, we designed the ramp, and a lot of that also gets fleshed out where the contractor may submit they want to install it one way or another. And we'd have to look at that.
But you've done all kinds of test borings and stuff
Right.
in the water.
Right, we've done the geotechnical boring to actually design what the concrete slab will need to be. We haven't actually done the slab design yet. And then in terms of the construction of it, whether it's cast in place, precast, sometimes contractors, when we get into construction, will submit a methodology and they'll give a submittal to the town as to how they propose to do that work, and it would be evaluated by, you know, by the town and your consultants at that point in time.
One other suggestion, maybe Chris might join with this, on the northern side of the ramp, perhaps putting in a piling or two. If you've ever seen the current flow is like almost a 5-knot current. If the tide is coming in, it literally pushes a lot of people upriver very quickly. I was just thinking if there was a piling or two, if you're looking, going out the ramp, maybe to the right of the ramp or to the north of it, might be beneficial. I don't know, the harbor master.
I'm not following what you're talking about at all. I'm
As
sorry,
you're-
just because
Putting a boat in the, down the ramp,
if you're launching,
the tide could, if you're launching, the tide could literally push the boat to the, into the bridge.
oh, so you're talking about
A
an extra
piling,
piling that's,
permanent piling that sits there that's,
that's just like at a ferry boat where I
Yes.
grew up. It basically keeps things sort of in line.
something to keep the boats from getting away from the handlers.
Right, but.
Because if the tide's going out, it's gonna go into the floating dock there in the ramp, so that'll stop it there, but
Mhm.
we're just thinking of a piling on the opposite side.
I have,
Just a thought.
Yeah, so at the state boat ramp, right, you have the two floating docks that go out well
Both
beyond
sides.
the bottom of the ramp. So when the boats go down, they're in that little protected area. I don't know how that would work there. It moves pretty quick. Is the bottom of the ramp, how much water is at the bottom of the ramp? But the boat's pretty much,
Varies.
Cars disappear there.
cars disappear. I've seen that. A few times, actually.
so when there is outgoing tide, now, that I expect happens, assuming there's also not a raging south wind.
I've put in boats and they start moving out the river
Right.
with the tide.
Right. I mean, the advantage we will have now is that the gangway paralleling the ramp,
On the south
Is right.
side.
right next is basically part of the ramp.
Yeah.
It's raised so that you can immediately, or if you have a helper, tie the boat off. You don't have to run across the beach, run out to retrieve your boat like you have to do now. So,
This would just be the opposite of what you've got now. And I was just saying that having a piling on the opposite side might give someone an opportunity to push off from that.
right.
Because a lot of people aren't really starting their engines until the boat's almost all the way in the water.
Yeah.
Is there a thought how the gangway and proposed dock is on the southern side of the ramp as opposed to the northern side? Generally, and this might just be myself, when I'm backing a boat down a ramp, it is much easier to have something on the driver's side, because as you're backing a boat in and you're looking through the passenger side mirror and back, you kind of can get some blind spots. And for sake of ease for the public, which is always a good thing, is to have the location in which your boat is going to be put in the water to have it on the driver's side. And if there was some reason other than that it switched from what's there now to something different. So basically what I'm saying is what you see with the gangplank
Right.
and the docks, in my mind, should be mirrored to the driver's side of the vehicle, where you have better vision of backing down the ramp. If somebody in the way, I can look and land my boat, truck, and trailer onto it, as opposed to looking in the passenger side mirror where you're kind of out in space,
Right.
and it's a little bit more difficult.
Right, those are good points. I had a bunch of good reasons to do it this way initially,
Yes,
and I've forgotten a lot of them by now because I'm old,
okay,
but I could probably find some text. But I am also aware that part of it was that the north-south section I had made even longer than this. And I was told that it doesn't need to be that long, and actually that wouldn't be a good idea. I think part of the idea was to get the floats away from the bridge.
yes,
And that's part of why we ran the floats south instead of north.
gotcha.
But
I think
one of the
we're
things we're also facing is there's a lot of runoff for the last 100 years off the parking lot that has filled in the beach area on the south side,
okay,
which may create some water depth problem because we are trying to avoid putting float stops on the floats. So we can look at whether it makes sense now to consider going north, because the thing that does occur to me is the water may be deeper there, so that we may get away from that problem.
I would say that it might not be a bad idea to then make a mirror image of what we see there on the north side. And the way that we're going right now, as we know, everything was built on site back in the 80s, 70s. When was that original ramp put in?
The early 70s.
Early 70s. And it's lasted a really long time. The problem that we have now is that with the recycled floats that we're using in our current, the floats are a little bit too far away from the ramp as to when you put your boat in the water at current time. The floats are a little bit too far, but if we could keep that same L shape
Right.
where it is, but move it closer to the ramp, so you could actually grab the dock when you put the boat in the water.
Yeah, you'll be on the dock.
Yeah,
When-
we're moving forward. Right now, with what we're running, it's recycled floats and free time from our local barge that puts the pilings in, fixes the pilings. And I think that maybe we should look into, in the ease of relieving blind spots while backing up, large equipment, that we would consider putting it on the north side.
Yeah, before we get do you have any particular reaction to that, Ryan?
No, from our perspective, it's really whatever you guys think is easier for the users of the dock for where it goes.
Yeah, the other thing I am aware of, just quickly, is that part of why we did this is that there is sort of a beach on the north side of the ramp, and that people are using now as a beach and might use more if it was nice. The area south of the ramp, we would do some environmental restoration because it's gotten beat up by the runoff from the parking lot. But I suppose we could flip it around and in some ways, having the floats there, because they will be much nicer floats than what you see now, and they will be brand new, might actually create a nice little protected area. The one reason now I am remembering is that as boats, most people who use the ramp go south. And so that when they are coming back out and it's crowded, having it in the ramp south of, having the float south of the ramp allows them to come in on both sides of the float pretty easily. Where the way it is now, you really cannot access the east side of the floats at all. So it kind of doubles, well, you have to go up and around.
It is doable, but sure.
But that was, I think now that I'm remembering and thinking about this, one of the primary reasons we did that, ran it south. But I'm happy to hear from members of the public, and yes, sir.
From a safety perspective, I agree. I think moving it a mirror image towards the north might be better, because if you've got kids jumping off the bridge, swimming to the floats to get back out of the water, they're gonna be swimming across the ramp area, and there's gonna be more boat traffic, and who knows what these kids will be doing.
Right, and you've had a lot of experience seeing that and rescuing people, and I appreciate that.
An awful lot of
Art,
experience.
do they, so they don't swim into the beach, they swim,
No, they swim to the dock.
and they somehow, because they're young, are able to pull themselves up on that tall, barnacly, awful dock
Yes.
or float.
Mhm.
So they choose not to swim to the muddy beach.
Correct.
Oh, that's good to know.
As it is here, they would actually swim right across the ramp area, or they might just go up the ramp, but they're putting themselves in harm's way of people backing in who are not really looking for swimmers.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking.
Yeah. Richie?
This might be away from what he's here for, but the state ramp, the rules and regulations are for the intended use of the facility. And they specify the intended use, and it's launching and hauling boats.
Mm-hmm.
The other stuff doesn't go. Otherwise, you have people camping down there, and it's a gas quiz, it's a mess. So,
Well, we have had signs up that say no jumping off the bridge.
yeah, I know.
They
but
sort of
what I'm saying
disappear.
is, when you're thinking about this boat ramp, think about the intended use of the ramp,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And you might, it's like the state ramp, you can launch and haul, anybody can. Any like the trailer, really. You can get it in there, it's the parking that's restricted. It's the parking, and the permit is for parking. So if you get a hurricane situation where you got people hauling boats out, anybody can get in line and launch. I would assume you could do this here.
That is my understanding of the laws of the Commonwealth, that anybody can use any ramp on public property to go in and out of the water. You just may not be able to park there.
Right. I don't know if anybody can use it at any time. Like the Westport Yacht Club has a ramp between trips of the yacht club. The
That's
Spindle
private.
Rock Club,
But those are private ramps.
yeah, you're saying any public.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Okay.
any public, even road into the water, anybody can access to launch, or you just may not be able to park.
Could be.
So
Jim.
is that as far out as the dock can go?
No, the dock can probably go further out if we wanted to. The ultimate arbiter of how far we're allowed to go out will end up being Army Corps, but we're not anywhere near being able to really talk to them yet. We haven't advanced the design to that point, but
There is channel markers,
Mhm.
demarcation on the bridge, so I
Yeah, we
don't,
wouldn't
I don't
know
know
which
how
channel.
far you can build a dock to a channel,
Yeah.
but that would be a limiting factor.
Right.
You can't build into a channel.
right, we definitely don't want to put it in the channel.
No.
I would encourage some no-wake, slow buoys on both sides of the bridge to cut down the speed of people going past the loading ramp.
Mhm.
And going underneath that bridge, which is totally blind. So you don't know what's on the other side of the bridge when you're going through there. And
As far as whether the floats are on the north or south side, does the boat wash from a jet ski or a motorboat going rapidly north and under the bridge? Do the floats knock down the wash much so that it's not gonna help that much?
it
In other words-
destroys the floats. I can tell you, because I have to replace my hinges on my floating portion of my dock almost every year.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, but does it help the loading, unloading of boats launching on, if the floats are on one side or the other to knock the wash down, or does the wave just move right under the float?
It would pick the float up and move under the float.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so I know it's just a plan, it's tough to visualize, but I put my boat in once a year and I take it out once a year. I'm getting a little better at it, but I wouldn't go down the state boat ramp at 7 o'clock in the morning on a busy Saturday and fight the traffic. But I use the whole thing when I put my boat in, right? So I'm walking down the dock and I'm pulling my boat off the trailer and I'm tying it up. It doesn't look like you have the room to do that here. So once the trailer is in, is the boat gonna be past the end of the dock when it comes off the trailer? Or is there room to take it off the trailer and tie it up to that dock going east-west? Or do you have to spin it around the end and?
You'd probably have to spin around the end. We haven't, in this dock is really shown at conceptual level. We haven't, fully designed it yet, but, where we are at water 0, 1, 2, so you're in probably like 4 feet of water in the
It's
end.
pretty deep.
Yeah. So on the smaller boats, there probably is room
Room.
to tie them up here. Larger boats would most likely have to spin around.
And depends on how high the tide is too. But that's another good reason for pushing the floats out further.
Right, and that's something we'd look at in a more advanced design phase too, is how much space do we think people need to get their boats docked up, and we can modify the dock geometry. That, what's shown right there, basically just matches, I think, the length of the dock that's already in place. But there's
Well, if the existing dock's working now, then.
right, so that just mirrors the existing, but if there's opportunity to increase the length.
And it appears to me, I was trying to bring up a map, but the floats don't look anywhere close to the channel right now. It looks to me like they're at least 30 feet east of the channel. So you could,
I mean, depending on the tide, it can be very deceptive. I
Mhm.
mean, right now, what I can tell you as the person that puts those float in and takes them out,
Mhm.
we've done different methods, and the easiest way to put in and remove those floats is at dead low tide. Because then you can just pretty much push the float to the loader, and it's all right there.
Right.
Because removing, this is another thing that we can talk about, that these are not permanent. These are seasonal things that need to come out of the water.
Right?
So the design factor of what we're talking about needs to listen to the people that take them in and put them out, and not make more trouble than what's already troublesome.
But I would expect that these new floats will be about a third of the weight of your existing floats. They will be way
That's-
lighter.
Are they composite?
They're probably polyethylene with tanks underneath them, some version of
Do you
that.
visualize it bottoming it or pilings? Hold them in place.
I think they're pilings is what we've been talking about. But they will be dramatically lighter than,
Right now, our current structure has 3 pilings and a couple of pieces of pipe. That's it. And especially with the winter time, and this is an area that does freeze, once those pilings get out and you're not on a schedule to reinstall them, you are gonna be sitting with floats in the parking lot with nothing to tie them to.
so are you suggesting we consider anchoring?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm just broad strokes trying to paint a
Yeah.
picture of
Yeah.
things to look out for.
But I'm not sure what we can do about that as far as planning to,
Yeah,
If you, Chris is saying, one thing, if you put pilings in, if that's your, part of your game, and the things freeze in the winter and get lifted out, you gotta put them back, and if you gotta go out to bid or contract, what he's saying is your floats might be up at the yard for quite a while.
Mhm.
The ramp won't be available.
Well, the ramp will be available, just,
Yeah, it won't be.
you won't have the
We
floats.
can float, yeah.
Yeah, so just something to think about,
Mhm.
because I cross my fingers every year, and when you go over Hicks Bridge and you say, wow, it's freezing, I say, oh no.
But it is at least, at the moment, freezing less.
Yeah, so you're talking about like the uplift as
Yeah,
it freezes,
it's
pulling the pile out?
Oh,
You
yeah.
get 2 times a day, and every time it freezes,
Yeah, so and that's something we can look at in pile design. When we look at the piles is you know, the actual uplift forces,
Mhm.
and trying to make sure they're deep enough that there's enough resistance to that.
Sure, that's something that we need to look
you
at.
don't
Yeah.
see a lot of docks, permanent docks out in the water up in that area. From there.
No.
There's a reason.
Right, yeah, because, you know, typically your water doesn't freeze, but we can look at that.
I would be I'm interested in just a bottom tackle design without pilings, just because if we've come this far, you might as well take a look at it specifically in that area.
Hmm.
It's easier to get a heavy weight and some chain than to wait for the barge and the crane to come up there.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. Open everybody's ideas there. We haven't even started to look at that yet.
The surface material for the floater should really be a composite, like Trex or something like that. It's more expensive up front, but you won't replace that for 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah, it's not gonna be wood. No. Does anybody else have questions?
Are we taking into account any sort of sea level rise?
Again, if we are moving a lot up to, say, a foot of gravel from this end down to this end, so we're trying to make most of the toxic runoff go into the catchment, to the treatment area, then yes, we're going to raise a berm and the boat ramp is going to be higher also. So that's part of what we will be applying for grants around accommodating sea level increase. So it'll be dramatically higher at this end to try to make the water go this way, the runoff. Because this can all go that way. Is that sort of right, Ryan?
Yeah, we'll be almost certainly the top of the boat ramp will be at a higher elevation than the current top of the boat ramp.
Yeah, as it sits right now, when we do get the lunar tides, the portions of the ramp that runs to the existing floats does go underwater.
Sort of the ramp that goes to the float. It's not.
Yeah.
Beginning of the ramp,
It's not-
beginning of the launch.
At what we have in present time, the ramp to then gain access to the floats can go underwater at high tide.
Oh, right, the whole
This
beach-
is just a statement.
Right, the
This
beach
not
is
a-
underwater, right.
Not,
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
top of the ramp though, right? Does it go that high into the parking lot?
Oh, yeah, it's, the last couple of days, it was super high tide. It's halfway in my yard.
Yeah, but again, the gangway
Yes,
is gonna be dramatically higher just by code
yes.
than that gangway you currently have that sits on the beach.
Do you know offhand how many parking permits are sold? I should know, and I wanna say it's well over 140.
Oh, yes, I think it's
300-400.
at least 300 and could be closer to 700.
Am I the only one that finds a problem with 12 parking spots for trucks and trailers
Oh,
without an overflow?
this is all gonna be redesigned
Okay.
around maximizing parking spaces, given that there's 28 in the photograph.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. But this is just what high tide looks like.
Right.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
yard.
I
Richard?
have one question while these guys are here, because this gentleman talked about grant money.
Mhm.
When we did the ramp, the state ramp, the issue came up with where was the money coming from? Was it federal money, was it state money, da-da-da-da-da, or local, whatever. And sometimes when you deal with federal money, it means it's available to anybody, the use of it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you people have looked into that or not. We're talking grant money. In other words, if you take money at a federal level, certain regulations come in, maybe Jim could.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm not sure what grants they'd be looking for, which ones we could apply for, but there are some restrictions that if we maybe use state money or federal money, they may want to open it up to the general public and
Right.
not just Westport
Right,
residents.
but our focus has been to apply for grant money that keeps it as a Westport facility and not a state facility.
Yeah, we just don't have, you don't have the parking availability for a full state facility.
Mhm.
No, I think, looking at the picture you have, even when we come back and stripe it, it's gonna even be hard to get enough parking on the site for the current use just in Westport.
Mhm.
It seems to have extremely high demand for this launch.
Any other questions, or can we move on to the next piece in our agenda? If not, thank you for coming. If you need to head home, please feel
Thank you.
free.
Good night. Do you guys want me to leave this full-size printout here? Take that with
Sure.
me? All right.
Moving quickly to the agenda about the head landing, I have no update about the railing, and have not heard from the Disability Commission about the idea of a cart that would make it possible for handicapped folks to more easily get onto the river there. So there's nothing to speak about there unless people have questions about number 2. Number 3, I have not had the time to make some plastic coyote signs to see if that would chase away the geese, but I am looking into that still actively.
Are you gonna write it in English?
I have encouraged some people with dogs to walk their dogs there and to think about ways, and there are some local folks who walk their dogs there regularly who like chasing geese, because the geese are a problem as far as polluting the river and also making the park area not exactly friendly for people to sit down and have lunch. On number 4, my sense is if we're gonna put a bench on the west side of the Hicksbridge Landing for people to sit and have lunch, we gotta wait till spring anyhow.
At this point, I'd agree.
Yep. We're moving quickly.
Yes.
Number 5, new commissioners. We are down 1 commissioner. So I believe that after adequate notice, which may be 30 days, the Board of Selectmen and the Landing Commission can meet together to appoint someone to an unexpired term who would then run for re-election. I'm not sure if right away or when that particular person's term expires. So for everybody out there in TV land who really wants to be here once a month, please consider getting in touch with the Landing Commission. And because you are welcome to do that, and we will probably be looking for someone to run for re-election anyhow, come the next election cycle. So that's what we know about that. Moving right along to the minutes from the last meeting. Have people had a chance to look at these?
I did. I read them through. I was not here, so I'm going to abstain.
Oh, since we don't have
So we
a
can't approve them.
We can't approve them because
Oh.
I'm your,
Move it to the next meeting to approve.
Okay.
yeah, they looked good to me, but I wasn't here at that meeting.
And how did they look to you, just in case we can get a little bit of a correction before that last one anyway?
I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The $3,400, I think, is correct.
Right. Okay. I'll pass that on to our secretary when she gets back from what she had to do today. Is there any other business not anticipated that anyone has?
Just want to mention that we did receive a donation from Power and Grace Yoga that uses the head landing there. They sent us a $500 donation back in September, so that was received and deposited.
Great. Thank you.
Should you send a letter of appreciation, or we don't have to?
Well, she sent us a thank you for letting her use the property.
Mhm.
So, in addition to this donation, and she said she also donated $150 to the watershed.
Mhm. Great. I'll send her an email about that. So, a next meeting date. We're into November. It's exactly a month. It would be either the 14th, and I guess the 21st is Thanksgiving week.
Yes, I'd definitely say the 14th.
I think even though we sometimes extend these meetings, the time between them in the winter, I do want to try to move this design phase, so I think he'll come up with something pretty quickly that's different than what we have now. So I think it'd be wise to meet again on the 14th, because we definitely want to be starting the grant application process, but plus there has to be a couple meetings of general public review. I mean, so that, and hopefully we'll just get people from the Harbor Advisory Commission and other people who use the boat ramp to show up and offer their ideas. And thank you very much. We'll look into swinging it the other direction. And if I have time, I'll get out there in a rowboat and check water depths, relative water depths, because that's of concern to me that we don't have to put the floats on chains.
Let me know, I can be available with the shellfish skiff, that I can pick you up at the ramp and we can go for just a little cruise,
Okay.
a sounding cruise.
A sounding, yeah, I have long sticks. Okay, that sounds like fun. I can bring lunch.
You're mine.
See how much fun we have on the landing
So
commission.
did you pick November 14th? Is that?
We did, yeah.
Make a motion?
I just think we
I
scheduled
think we
it.
just schedule, we don't move that, unless you really need to, we can.
So November 14th.
Okay. And that'll be landing commission at 4 o'clock, again. Is there,
Move to adjourn?
here we go.
Second?
All in favor of adjourning?
Yes, yes.
Aye.